I am Lauren Mitchell. Today I'm going to tell you my story, a wife whose effort to support her husband ended up leading to the discovery of betrayal. I had been married for 3 years to Nathan, a relationship I believed was as solid as the foundation of our suburban home. Our marriage had weathered the usual storms couples face, financial pressure, career changes, family disagreements. But each time we came out stronger, reinforcing my belief that we truly were partners in every sense. Nathan worked as a senior marketing director at a mid-sized consulting firm, a position that demanded long hours, frequent travel, and heavy pressure for results. I was always the one supporting him wholeheartedly, understanding that his career ambitions required sacrifices from both of us. I was willing to take on the role of the supportive wife, managing the household, social commitments, and personal tasks so Nathan could fully focus on his career. His close friend, Mason Cole, had been present in our lives for nearly 5 years. Originally a colleague of Nathan's before he started his own freelance marketing business, Mason had transitioned smoothly from my husband's acquaintance to our mutual friend, becoming a regular guest at our dinners. I welcomed him into our inner circle, appreciating his humor and his insight into Nathan's work world. The three of us developed comfortable routines, Mason joining our weekend barbecues, going to movies and concerts with us, and being Nathan's confidant during especially stressful stretches at work. I never once questioned the closeness between the two men, seeing it as a healthy friendship that enriched all of our lives. Looking back, I realized my trust had blinded me to warning signs that a more suspicious wife might have noticed easily. The weeks leading up to Nathan's presentation were a blur of preparation and rising tension. This project was the culmination of 18 months of relentless work, a comprehensive marketing strategy for a major potential client that could significantly elevate both his professional standing and our financial stability. Nathan had poured everything into every detail, working late into the night, downing countless cups of coffee, and covering the dining table with charts, graphs, and pitch materials. I had watched my husband change during this time, seeing both the dedication and the mounting pressure he was placing on himself. I understood how important this opportunity was, not just for his career, but for his sense of professional self-worth and for our shared future. The prospective client was a Fortune 500 company, and winning the contract could cement Nathan's position and possibly lead to the promotion he had been pursuing for years. Understanding the weight of this moment, I threw myself into creating the perfect supportive environment. I took on all housework, managed the schedule to minimize distractions, and even learned enough about his project to act as a sounding board whenever he needed to articulate his ideas. The night before the presentation, I made his favorite meal, herb-roasted salmon with roasted vegetables, and spent the evening listening to him rehearse his pitch, encouraging him and offering small suggestions. That morning, as Nathan gathered his things and prepared to head out for a day we both hoped would be a turning point in his career, he hugged me with genuine warmth. "You're going to do great," I whispered, straightening his tie. "I'm so proud of the effort you've put into this." Nathan's smile seemed sincere, though a little tight with nerves. "I couldn't do this without your support," he replied, kissing my forehead. "Tonight we celebrate, just the two of us." As I watched his car disappear down our tree-lined street, I felt a mix of pride and nervous energy. I spent the whole morning imagining the presentation, picturing Nathan's success, and planning our celebratory dinner for that evening. But when I went to tidy up Nathan's home office, a space that had grown increasingly chaotic during his weeks of preparation, I saw his sleek black laptop sitting on the desk, the power cord neatly coiled beside it. My heart clenched instantly. This wasn't just any laptop. It was the vault of months of work, containing not only the presentation files, but also backup research materials, client correspondence, and reference documents Nathan might need during questions or discussions. The presentation was scheduled for early afternoon, and without this essential tool, all his preparation could fall apart. My first reaction was to call Nathan's cell phone, but it rang and went straight to voicemail, likely because he was in a meeting or already en route to the hotel venue. I left an urgent message explaining the situation and immediately began planning. Time was critical. The presentation was set for 2 p.m., and it was now nearing 11 a.m. The Grand Hyatt Plaza, where the presentation was being held, was downtown, about 40 minutes away. I quickly gathered the laptop, Nathan's backup USB drives, and a few additional materials he might need, placing everything carefully into his leather messenger bag. I felt both the urgency and a quiet satisfaction. I was about to prevent a disaster and make a meaningful contribution to his big moment. Driving into the city, I pictured Nathan's relief and gratitude when I showed up with the materials he needed. Maybe I'd even stay to watch the presentation from the back of the room, sharing in his moment of triumph. The thought of being present for such an important milestone in his career filled me with excitement and strengthened the feeling that I was truly a partner in his success. The Grand Hyatt Plaza was a luxurious venue often used for corporate events, conferences, and high-level business meetings. I'd attended a few events there over the years and was familiar with its layout: an impressive grand lobby with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, multiple conference rooms and ballrooms, and an atmosphere of polished, authoritative professionalism. Yet as I stepped into the lobby that afternoon, something felt wrong. Instead of the lively energy I expected from an important company presentation, the space was strangely quiet. A few guests wandered through the lobby with unhurried steps, and the usual buzz of business activity was completely absent. The conference room directory, normally filled with a list of scheduled events, displayed no company functions for the day. I approached the front desk, where a young woman with gentle eyes and a professional demeanor greeted me warmly. "Excuse me," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for the Hartwell Industries presentation. My husband is Nathan Mitchell, and he's supposed to be presenting this afternoon." The receptionist's expression shifted into polite confusion. "I'm very sorry, but we don't have any corporate events or presentations scheduled today." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Please check your system again. There must be some mistake. This presentation has been planned for months." After a few minutes of searching on her computer and speaking with other staff over the phone, the receptionist confirmed that while there was no Hartwell Industries event booked for today, one was scheduled for the following week. "However," she added, glancing at the screen again, "I do see a room reservation under the name Mitchell. Room 1247. Would you like me to call up to the room?" The numbness that had been slowly spreading through my body suddenly intensified. "No," I managed to say. I'll go up myself." The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless, each floor marking another step toward a truth I wasn't sure I even wanted to uncover. My mind spun through possible explanations. Maybe Nathan had lost track of time, or maybe there had been some administrative error in the hotel's booking system. I wanted to call Mason, to hear him reassure me, to hear him tell me that all of this was just my imagination running wild. But even as I tried to reason my way through the situation, a deeper part of my mind had already begun processing the implications of what I knew. The complete absence of any company event, combined with the private room reservation, shattered everything I believed about my husband. The elevator stopped on a few floors, a couple of guests stepping out, and when it finally reached the 12th floor, the door slid open with a polite little chime that now haunts my dreams. The moment the doors opened, the unmistakable sound of intimate laughter drifted out, followed by the sight of Mason leaning in, stealing a quick, secretive kiss on my husband's cheek. They hugged with the passion and familiarity of longtime lovers, their body language speaking clearly of a closeness that had been building for a long time. My husband wasn't just having an affair. My closest friend, the man I had welcomed into my home, shared meals with, confided in, and treated like family, had been deceiving me alongside him, carrying on an affair right in front of my face. There was this moment, a heartbeat long, when Nathan's eyes shifted from Mason's face to mine. 3 seconds for his brain to process the fact that his wife, his actual legal wife, was standing in the elevator watching him being kissed and embraced by his best friend. His face changed colors faster than a mood ring in a horror movie. Red, white, gray, then almost green. His hand pushed Mason away, as if he had suddenly caught fire, and he stumbled back half a step, something that would have been funny if my entire life hadn't been collapsing inside an elevator that was now closing again and continuing upward. My first reaction was physical, a violent wave of nausea so strong I had to grab the wall to stay upright, followed by the sensation that the floor itself was vibrating under my feet. The emotional impact hit in waves: shock, disbelief, anger, humiliation, and a sense of betrayal deeper than any physical pain I had ever felt. As I looked at the two men standing together, memories began surfacing with cruel clarity. Mason's constant presence in my home, the private jokes between him and Nathan that I never quite understood, the business trips they occasionally took together, and the subtle shifts in Nathan's behavior over recent months. All of these details now formed a pattern I had once been too trusting to see. Ground floor. The elevator doors opened, returning me to the hotel's wide lobby with its glossy stone walls and soft gold lighting spread across the ceiling. I stepped out first, turned back, and saw the two of them standing at the elevator like a pair of teenagers who had just been caught sneaking home past curfew. "Nathan," I said, my voice so calm even I didn't quite believe it, considering my hands were trembling. "I'm going to drive home now. You have exactly 18 minutes to decide which version of this story you plan to tell me. Choose wisely." I paused, eyes locked on him. "And act like an adult." Then I turned away, leaving my husband, his best friend, and the intimacy they'd just tried to stuff back into their pockets, standing frozen in that elevator as if they hadn't yet processed the flawless disaster of the morning they'd so carefully planned. The 90-second walk to the parking garage passed in a half-dream state. The 18-minute drive home did not. In those 18 minutes, the initial shock began to cool, solidify, then transform into something else entirely. Sharp, direct, and absolutely clear. There was one thing Nathan had forgotten during the long stretch of cheating on me. I wasn't just the wife standing behind him, supporting. I am extremely good at reading intent, and if there's anything I do better than most, it's dismantling a story someone is still trying to use to lie to me. When you drive in a state of mental numbness, your brain starts replaying every red flag you ignored for months. Like rewatching a montage of your own gullibility, except you're the main character in that comedy, and there's no popcorn to soften the bitterness. When I turned onto our street, Nathan's car was already there. Of course it was. He had probably shredded every speed limit on the way back, desperate to craft a story that sounded plausible. I had handled more crises than I'd cooked dinners. I knew there was no miraculous explanation that could save a betrayal this blatant. You had an entire second life in a hotel room at the exact hour you said you were working. I sat in the car for another minute, looking through the kitchen window. Nathan was pacing, his hand running through his hair the way he always did when he panicked, as if messing up his hairstyle could somehow untangle the mess in his brain. When I opened the door and stepped inside, he was standing by the kitchen counter. The same counter we had eaten breakfast at that morning, where he kissed me and said thank you, where he promised a celebration dinner for his big success today. Thinking back on it now feels almost comedic, because while he was promising dinner with me, he was busy thinking about the man I once considered a friend. "Lauren, I can explain," he began. The worst opening line of any conversation involving betrayal. Right up there with, "It's not what you think," and "You're overreacting." I set my bag down calmly, removed my coat, folded it neatly over the back of a chair, and let the silence stretch until it became a weapon. A small tactic I'd learned from negotiation training. Whoever speaks first loses. Nathan lasted 45 seconds before cracking. "Mason doesn't mean anything," he said. I laughed. Not a joyful laugh, the kind that escapes when someone says something so stupid it almost breaks physics. The kind people say more to convince themselves than to convince you. "Oh, doesn't mean anything," I repeated slowly, as if testing whether the sentence became more logical the second time. It didn't. The man you've spent 3 evenings a week with for months means nothing. The man you kissed in a hotel, on the day you said you were presenting, means nothing. The man you held like you'd disappear if you let go, also means nothing. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. A familiar loop. I just want to know when you found out, Nathan finally said, attempting to shift the focus onto me. A very poor deflection strategy. When? I glanced at my watch, deliberately theatrical. About 20 minutes ago, when you two walked out of a hotel room like you were shooting an ad for a happy couple. When I came to bring your laptop, I added, pointing to the leather messenger bag I'd set on the chair. Until that moment, I had been completely oblivious, living a peaceful life, believing my husband was truly working when he said he was working to build a future for us. A ridiculous idea, apparently. Nathan started pacing again, across the same kitchen floor we had once argued over for 3 hours, trying to choose between marble or quartz. We chose quartz, less likely to stain, he'd said. In hindsight, poetic. He liked everything spotless, especially his tracks. It just happened, he said, choosing the exact brand of cheap excuse people use when they don't want to take responsibility, as if he had accidentally slipped into a months-long secret relationship filled with embraces, kisses, and a hotel room booked under his name. It just happened, I repeated. You tripped into a hotel and accidentally booked a room? I said, my voice light but sharp enough to cut steel. Or a gust of wind blew you straight into Mason's arms, over and over for months? Please, enlighten me. Don't be like that, Lauren, he said, and that made me laugh again, a bitter, sharp sound that escaped before I could stop it. Be like what, Nathan? I tilted my head. Sad? Angry? Or should I be generous? Should I sit down for coffee with your lover to discuss a custody schedule for you? Maybe split the week. I keep you in the evenings, Mason gets the rest, and we hire a mediator to divide the masculinity in you. Sounds civilized, doesn't it? The funniest part was how Nathan looked genuinely wounded, as if I were being unreasonable for not throwing my arms open to forgive his betrayal. Where's Mason? I asked, shifting tone abruptly. The man who has clearly been sitting at my dinner table every week, pretending to be friendly with me. Have you texted him yet? Told him your wife found out, and you need a few minutes to improvise. A tiny twitch in Nathan's hand, right where his phone sat in his pocket, told me everything. He had. Of course you did, I continued, not giving him space to breathe. Let me guess. You two get a thrill out of lying to me? Nathan stayed silent, the kind of silence that doesn't need words, because it already confessed for him. I walked to the coffee machine and turned it on. The machine hissed, steamed, filling the room with noise while Nathan scrambled internally, choosing which version of the remorseful husband character he'd play next. Tell me, I said, pouring coffee, but never taking my eyes off him. How did it start? I'm trying to understand how you had time to juggle being the good husband while sneaking around with another man. When exactly? When I wasn't home? Nathan swallowed hard. No, it was about a year ago. You were on a work trip. Mason and I had a bit too much to drink. I don't know. I'd gotten used to him showing up whenever I was tired or frustrated. And then things slipped. Wonderful, I nodded slowly. Talking. And talking led to what? 1 beer? 2? Then suddenly you woke up in a full-blown secret relationship? Mason didn't want to deceive you, Nathan said, as if that was supposed to be some kind of shield. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, lovely, a new level of betrayal. He slept with my husband and didn't want me to know. I lifted my hand to my forehead as if checking for a fever. Why didn't you tell me? I lived in this house, slept next to you, washed your clothes, while you were quietly shifting your sexuality. Should I have sent a congratulatory card? Lauren, please. Please what? Understand? Forgive? Pretend this is somehow my fault because you weren't happy beside me? I lifted the coffee cup, both hands around it, despite the heat. The burn felt strangely fitting for the moment. When exactly were you planning to tell me, Nathan? Or were you going to keep living like this forever? Until one of you died? Were you going to split funeral attendance like shift schedules? Nathan dropped into a chair, exhausted. Good. At least honesty was creeping in. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I want, he said. And maybe that was the first truthful sentence he'd spoken since I stepped inside the house. No, Nathan, I replied, my voice icy. You weren't thinking at all. That's the problem. You felt entitled to a stable, respectable marriage with no scrutiny while keeping a lover on the side to color your life. You thought you were smart enough to never get caught. I took a sip of coffee, the heat stinging my tongue, and I didn't care. Now, here is what's going to happen. Tonight you're sleeping on the couch, I said, my voice calm to the point of sounding almost emotionless. Tomorrow I will call a lawyer, someone good, because this marriage is over, Nathan, and after that, you're going to experience what it feels like to have someone who once trusted you look you in the eyes and no longer recognize who you are. He looked up, a flicker of fear passing through his eyes. And yes, he should be afraid. He had underestimated me, lied to me for a year, assumed I would always be content to stand behind him, content with my small job, content with our suburban life, brazen enough to bring his lover into my home thinking I wouldn't notice. That was his mistake. His first mistake was thinking he could hide everything. His second mistake was who he chose to cheat with and betray me for. If it had been another woman, I might have compared myself, wondered what I lacked, questioned what I had done wrong in our marriage. At least I would have had a chance to consider whether I could pull him back to our family. But none of that was possible. And the worst part is, he didn't know he was walking straight into mistake number 3. A mistake so enormous, the first 2 looked like warm-ups. He looked at me, and it seemed like he'd regained a bit of composure. It was just a mistake. I'll break it off with Mason. We're still married. No one will believe what you saw. I deleted everything. He said it with confidence, walking upstairs into the bathroom, and for a moment, I went still, stunned by the sheer shamelessness. He cheated on me with another man. He was threatening me. But what he didn't know was this. When the receptionist spoke, I had already started doubting. When I was in the elevator wanting to call Mason for comfort, I didn't call. Instead, I turned on video recording, and in the few seconds as the elevator doors opened, my phone captured everything. Even through betrayal and heartbreak, I wanted a quiet divorce, something that at least left us a shred of dignity. But if he didn't want that, I didn't sleep that night. Not at all. I sat in front of the laptop in the home office, the room Nathan used most often, especially when Mason came over, because he preferred discussing work in the office. Another lie in a growing encyclopedia of lies nobody asked for. I started with the basics, 2 years' worth of statements from our joint bank account. And just as I suspected, small traces began to appear. Breadcrumbs I couldn't believe I had missed for so long. Every month, as punctual as a mortgage payment, $1,200 went to a property management company called Hillside Suites Management. 24 months. Not one missed. I moved on to the credit card statements. Every Wednesday night, there were food charges, dinner receipts for 2, and bar tabs, the cost of meals for an entire week. It was all painfully clear. A whole second life had been maintained, using our shared money. On the nights, I thought he was exhausted from work. While I stayed up late cleaning the house, editing documents for him, Nathan and his best friend were enjoying an entirely different life. But the most interesting detail was elsewhere. The hotel room Nathan rented, he didn't pay for it, and Mason didn't either. It was registered as a corporate lease apartment, paid for by Nathan's own company under the category of client hospitality and long-term consultant lodging. The creativity would have been impressive if it weren't completely Illegal. I opened his company's employee handbook, flipped straight to the ethics and anti-fraud section, and began highlighting, annotating, cross-checking dates. A tangled web of deception unfolded, and Nathan had no idea. I had already started pulling each thread loose, one by one. By 3 a.m, I had built a timeline so detailed it could have made a forensic auditor cry from joy. By the next morning, I had copies of everything. The withdrawals Nathan had made from our joint account, the documentation showing the company funds being used to pay for the apartment, and even better, the hotel's security cameras had captured footage of Nathan and Mason entering and leaving the hotel that day. Full timestamps, crystal clear. Neither Nathan nor Mason could afford to get aggressive or dismissive without creating a spectacle that would only destroy their reputations further. But I didn't stop there. I called my lawyer, not the family attorney who handled our house purchase, my own lawyer, Marin, whom I met at an event, a specialist in high-conflict divorces, infamous for being ruthless but terrifyingly effective. When I laid out everything I had gathered, Marin laughed. "Oh my God," she said. "He handed you the entire win on a silver platter. Financial fraud, misuse of corporate funds, sustaining a second household with marital assets without disclosure. This case is going to be fun." Fun wasn't the word I would have chosen, but I appreciated her professional enthusiasm. The next logical stop should have been Nathan's HR department, but going directly would tip him off. So instead, I met a former coworker of mine who had transferred to Nathan's company 2 years earlier. We grabbed lunch, light conversation. I casually mentioned that I was helping Nathan prepare tax documents and needed to verify his company's housing policies. She opened her process handbook right on the table. Expense verification procedures, required documentation, approval workflows, audit regulations, and the crucial part, Nathan had forged his supervisor's signature, falsified expense reports, and created a phantom external consultant named Marcus Cole, a person who never existed. Fraud. Actual fraud. The kind people get criminally charged for. That was Nathan's third mistake. He thought I would never check. Thought I'd be too heartbroken, too shocked, too kind to dig through this mountain of garbage. But betrayal has a price, and he destroyed my life, destroyed my faith in love and marriage. By Friday, I had a 3-inch thick file, bank statements, credit card bills, security footage, an email chain I pulled from our archived shared folder, text messages from Nathan's phone, messages he stupidly allowed to auto-sync to the home computer. I photographed everything, made 3 copies, one for my lawyer, one for myself, and one for the event Nathan would never forget for the rest of his life. I spent Monday and Tuesday in a strangely calm state. I went to work, finished my tasks, smiled at everyone as if my life hadn't exploded the previous weekend. Nathan and I barely spoke. He slept on the couch, left the house very early, came home very late, avoiding my eyes in every way possible. I assumed he spent most of that time reassuring Mason that everything would be fine, that he would figure it out, that they just needed a little more time. On Wednesday morning, I put on my most powerful outfit, a black structured shoulder dress, the kind that makes you look like you could either run a Fortune 500 company or burn it to the ground in one night, depending on your mood. Pearl earrings, my best heels, a perfect icy exterior. Today was Nathan's company anniversary gala. A very important night. I smiled at myself in the mirror. The kind of smile designed for public settings, polite, but nowhere near my eyes. This will be a night no one forgets, I told myself. And I meant it. The event venue was exactly what you'd expect from an American high-end private club, luxurious in a restrained way, but outrageously expensive. Servers in bow ties moved around with trays of champagne, each glass probably worth someone's hourly wage. And the room was full of people pretending they weren't secretly comparing their status to everyone around them. Nathan's company had rented the largest ballroom. Round tables covered in white linens, decorated with orchids, and twisted willow branches that someone had apparently decided counted as art. At the front, a stage for awards and speeches. The bar was already 3 layers deep with people trying to take the edge off. I arrived separately from Nathan, which earned a few raised eyebrows, but not enough curiosity to spark questions. I said I was coming from a client meeting. A pleasant, believable lie. No one pressed further. My lawyer was already there, standing toward the back, elegantly dressed and ready to act as a witness, and to record everything if needed. When she saw me, she gave me a thumbs up. Nathan stood near the bar, looking uncomfortable in his tux, and next to him was Mason. In a perfectly tailored deep blue suit, the kind that made him look like a successful executive instead of the third party in his best friend's marriage. He carried the vague confidence of someone who believed his secret was well protected. They hadn't noticed me yet. I watched them for a moment. The way Nathan leaned slightly toward Mason when speaking. The way Mason's eyes lit up when Nathan smiled. The way Mason's hand brushed against Nathan's back and lingered a bit lower than any friend should, only for half a second, but intimate enough to feel like a slap. They looked happy, normal, like 2 men enjoying their company's big gala, not 2 people who built a relationship on deceit and betrayal. I took a champagne flute from a passing server. I needed something to hold, to keep my hands occupied, to stop myself from doing anything impulsive before the real show began. Act 10. The company president, a man named Frederick, whom I once thought was reasonably intelligent until tonight, walked onto the stage around 7:30 p.m. He opened the program with a speech about innovation, commitment, collaboration, a string of corporate buzzwords that sound important, but are as empty as a PowerPoint slide with no content. Then came the awards. High-achieving employees, predictable back-patting, the kind of ritual that forces everyone to endure 2 extra hours just to justify eating a mediocre dinner. And of course, Nathan won an award. The irony was thick enough to carve with the dull knife sitting next to the rubbery chicken breast everyone was pretending to enjoy. Nathan went up to receive his glass trophy and delivered a speech about teamwork, dedication, thanking the company, thanking his colleagues, not thanking me, not even glancing my direction once. But he did give Mason a small smile, just enough to raise my blood pressure a few points. When he returned to his table, I stood and walked straight toward the stage. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough for the room to hear, while maintaining perfect fake politeness. "Frederick, I apologize for the interruption, but I have something I need to share with everyone. It relates to transparency and ethics, things you just mentioned. So I think this is the perfect moment." Frederick frowned in confusion. Nathan looked like he was about to have a stroke. The room shifted, chairs scraping softly, the universal sign that something big was about to happen. "I'm Lauren Mitchell," I continued, sounding so professional I could have been narrating a law firm commercial. "Some of you know me as Nathan's wife." I took a USB from my purse. A poor tech staffer came over to help me plug it into the projection system. The 2 large screens beside the stage lit up. "What is this?" Frederick asked, looking from me to Nathan. "A case study," I answered lightly, "about expense fraud, misuse of company funds, and the importance of verifying documents employees submit. Nathan, sweetheart, you might want to take a seat." The first slide appeared. A bold title, "The Hidden Costs of Deception." Nathan shot up, rushing toward the stage. "Lauren, stop!" "Stop what?" I asked, sounding almost innocent. "Stop sharing information? Stop presenting facts? Stop making you look bad in front of your coworkers and your lover, who happens to be sitting at table 7 and looking increasingly uncomfortable?" Mason lowered his head. A few people gasped when they heard the word lover. Then, hilariously, several people at table 7 began scanning the women at their table, trying to guess who I meant. "Lauren Mitchell," Frederick said quietly. "I'm not sure this—" "Of course it's inappropriate," I agreed. "Just like using corporate funds to rent secret hotel rooms and submitting fraudulent expense reports is inappropriate. Yet here we are." I clicked to the next slide. A timeline appeared. Every fraudulent expense over the past year marked in red. Dates, amounts, categories. All cross-referenced with Nathan's work schedule, proving he was never where he claimed to be. As you can all see, I said, presenting as smoothly as if this were a major pitch. The fraud begins right around the same time my husband conveniently formed a new relationship, using company funds to rent hotels. Creative, if not entirely illegal. The next slide came up. Nathan's forged signature. The fabricated consultant file for Marcus Cole, a person who never existed. Plot twist, I said softly. Marcus Cole isn't real, but Mason Cole is. He's sitting right over there. Should I also ask Nathan about the monthly $1,200 transfers? The lavish two-person dinners charged to our joint finances? Mason stood abruptly, clearly wanting to leave. You should sit down, I advised gently, like a doctor delivering bad news. This concerns you too, especially the part about legal and financial liability you'll both be facing. The room was dead silent, except for the soft click as I advanced the slide. Security footage appeared. Nathan and Mason at the hotel elevator. The hug, the stolen kiss, the unmistakable intimacy. Frederick, I said evenly, I sent the entire file to HR and legal before coming here. Your employee handbook is very clear about fraud and misrepresentation. Nathan had gone pale, truly gray, like the blood had reversed direction in his veins. You can't do this, he stammered. I already did, I corrected. I removed the USB and placed it in Frederick's hand. All reports, including the $38,000 in misused funds over the past year, are in there, I said, not including what the IRS will be interested in. I stepped down from the stage. The room was frozen, no one sure whether to clap or call security. My lawyer was recording, looking impeccably professional, if not for the satisfied smile on her lips. As I walked past Nathan's table, I stopped and looked straight at Mason, his face pale, his eyes full of confusion and fear. Even though you betrayed me, I said quietly, I once considered you a friend. Then I turned away and walked out of that brightly lit room with my head held high, leaving behind the wreckage of Nathan's career, his reputation, and the two-faced facade he had spent years constructing. In the parking lot, I leaned against my car, exhausted enough that my legs wanted to give out, but I kept my back straight. My phone buzzed nonstop, Maren calling. I got everything on video, she said without even greeting me. Perfect, I replied. Maren continued, her voice almost cheerful. Nathan is about to face a very expensive set of legal problems, corporate fraud, falsified reports, and now a public scandal. He should have planned ahead. I closed my eyes and whispered, Is it wrong that I feel relieved? Maren answered, No, Lauren. He stole from you, deceived you, trapped you in a fantasy life. Feeling relief when the truth comes out is healthy. The next morning, Nathan was fired. By noon, the entire business community was murmuring about the story. A week later, the audit department launched a full investigation. Everything collapsed faster than anyone expected. I stood outside it all, quietly watching like someone viewing an old movie, one where the protagonist was no longer me, at least not the naive version of me. 6 months later, I sat by the window of my new loft, 8th floor, where the morning light filtered through the wide glass and spread across the floor like a thin blanket of pale gold. The divorce was finalized, papers tidy, signatures decisive. I kept most of the assets, not out of greed, but because they were the parts of life I had built. Nathan, meanwhile, unemployed, saddled with the debt left from his fraud, plus monthly alimony, a steady reminder of the choices he had believed no one would uncover. I wasn't happy, nor was I heartbroken. I simply felt peaceful, a new kind of peace, like learning to breathe deeply for the first time in crisp autumn air. I started writing. The blog, Renovating After Ruin, was born on a rainy night when I placed my hands on the keyboard and let the words pour out like water finding its path. Then came the podcast. Then came emails from women everywhere, sharing their pain, their betrayals, the years they had spent in dimly lit rooms. I told my story in a low, steady voice, no longer bitter, but the way someone recounts a storm that's already passed, so listeners know they too can survive. My career unexpectedly bloomed, perhaps because people saw in me someone who not only worked hard, but also rebuilt herself after being shattered. A new office corner, a new team, bigger projects. Everything arrived gently, naturally, as if it had been waiting for me to step out of my old life. Sometimes, in the late afternoons, I sit by the window with a cup of hot tea, watch the cars below streak into red ribbons of light, and think about the Lauren from a year ago. The small woman who always stood behind, always waited, always believed love meant enduring. Now I know, love, first and foremost, is honesty with yourself. Nathan still texts sometimes, long messages, full of ellipses, apologies arriving as late as a lost winter. I don't reply. Not out of hatred, but because I no longer belong in the room where I once lost myself. I live my new life gently. Mornings making coffee, opening the windows to let the wind slip through my hair. Evenings turning off every light except a single candle, just enough illumination to remind me that I am exactly where I'm meant to be. A space that belongs to me, rebuilt by my own hands, and the courage I didn't know I had until the day the elevator stopped on the 12th floor. Now, when I think back to that moment the door opened, I no longer feel pain. I just see a beginning, a crack that revealed an entire sky behind it. And in the quiet of my loft, I understand something important. I didn't become strong because Nathan betrayed me. I became strong because I chose to step out of that shadow and rebuild my life, detail by detail. I turned betrayal into knowledge, turned pain into a career, turned loss into the foundation of a small empire, clean, honest, wholly mine. Nathan lost everything. The man who deceived me now faces consequences equal to his actions, a ruined reputation, broken relationships. And me. I got myself back. If you're still here, thank you. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If you've ever walked out of a relationship that made you lose yourself, or if you're learning how to stand back up from a crack in your life, tell me where you're listening from. Leave your city, your country in the comments. I want to send a greeting to you wherever you are out there, maybe in the middle of a windy morning or a quiet late night. And if you see yourself in this story, just remember, you are not alone.